The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Greetings from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and welcome to another 1615 webinar. I'm Matthew Ellison, President at 1615. Today's webinar is entitled Unleashing Radical Missions Generosity. It has been said that all of the resources necessary to send and support an army of self-sacrificing, joy-spreading ambassadors is already in the church, but they're not giving it. There are many reasons for this, not the least of which is that many potential donors have resources that are unknowingly slipping through the cracks. This very practical webinar is designed to show church and mission agency leaders how to help their donors rescue their hard-earned savings that are lost to unknown fees and taxes in order to redirect them into God's global mission. Today's subject matter expert is Chris Abeda. He's the principal and co-founder at Accelerated Wealth. Chris was the best man at my wedding. I was the best man at his. He's one of my closest and dearest friends. And Chris is one of the key reasons I became engaged in world missions. So in just a minute, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Chris, but first just a couple of details to our live audience. Number one, your phones are muted to preserve sound quality. You can listen through your computer speakers, or you can call in on the telephone. Secondly, as questions come to mind today, please type them in the question and answer panel located in the GoToWebinar task panel on the upper right-hand side of your screen. We'll be addressing questions for the last 15, 20 minutes of our time together. 54 people are registered for today's live webinar, and I want to remind everyone that this webinar is also being recorded and will be available for download at 1615.org in the next few weeks. Again, that's 1615.org. In just a second, I'm going to turn it over to Chris here, which will take me a minute to get the control set. But Chris, you had asked me to just open it up to the audience right now. I think your idea was if they could identify what they would like to gain today by listening to this webinar. You want to expand on that a little bit, and then I'll try and address those questions?
Sure. It's always helpful, especially when you can't see individuals face-to-face, just to get an idea of why did you jump on the webinar, what are things that you hope that you can learn. I may be able to craft and address, certain specific things or general topics that are important. So, yeah, I'd love to just hear that up front. That way, I can maybe be a little more specific.
Sure. So again, if you want to address what you would like to receive today, what you hope to gain by listening to this webinar, if you can take a moment and add that to the question and answer panel, and I will address those. And if nothing comes in at this point, Chris, we're just going to go ahead and move forward. So let's give it just a second there.
You know what, and while we're letting those come in, why don't I, do you want to just go ahead and give a little my bio, and then I can do the same while we're waiting for those?
Sure, yeah. As I mentioned, Chris is a longtime friend, one of my dearest friends, and I think it was summer of '93, Chris, where you would convince me to go on the mission field with you for a short-term experience in Ghana, West Africa, and that was a life changer for me. God just totally changed my life trajectory. Chris has been a close friend. We've done a lot of missions adventures all over the world. We've served together in many capacities. And Chris, with that, why don't you just expand on your missions journey and how you ended up where you're at right now?
You bet. So there's a picture of me with my daughters, my two teenage daughters. So I've got a 16-year-old there on the right, a 13-year-old there on the left, and then I got another 10-year-old little boy. And that is this summer. We were in Peru in Machu Picchu, and my two daughters were going on their, I think my oldest, that was her 5th mission trip, and my other daughter, this was her 2nd mission trip. And a little bit about my background. I have been an ordained minister since 1994. I cut my teeth in missions when I was in college. I went to the University of New Mexico. That's where Matt and I grew up together in Albuquerque. And my freshman year, I went for a 2-month trip to Honduras, and I found why I was alive. It was to share the gospel in adventurous places, and went 11 consecutive summers. I spent 11 consecutive summers overseas leading teams on short-term mission adventure trips, typically for 2 months at a time, and I would take 80, 90, sometimes up to 100 teens at a time, and that's where Matt and I spent the summer in 1993. I was leading that trip, and he came, and we spent a summer in Ghana, Africa. I was also the executive director of Acquire the Fire Youth Conventions, which is like a Promise Keepers for teenagers. I worked with a ministry called Teen Mania Ministries for about 9 years. Led lots and lots of teams on missions for those 1990 through 2002. Here's the profound thing for me is, you know, I go away into my ministry career, come back, and 20-some years later, I'm now leading teams with my daughters on missions. And oh my goodness, the emotion and the excitement to see my girls and my kids get excited to share the gospel and lay hands and pray for people and do that. And I'm so blessed to be able to have the privilege of seeing my daughters do what I was so passionate about and seeing them do that as well. So I worked for that ministry. Then I went and moved on and worked for John Maxwell when they were in Atlanta and part of Enjoy and Maximum Impact. I was an executive director there. John Maxwell is a leadership author. And then I moved all the way across the country and became a vice president at Purpose Driven Church, working for Rick Warren. And then after that, Focus on the Family is what brought me here to Colorado Springs, where I'm based today, and I was the director of church outreach and built a strategy on how to help the church help its families, how to help the church help its parents, and passing on the faith to the next generation and its marriages. And then, at an interesting turn of events in 2008, when the market crashed, I was like most investors, had my money in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. For the second time in my life, I lost 50% of everything I had ever saved, and I got laid off. And when I got laid off, I started looking for other job opportunities and looking for something I was passionate about, having worked for some, you know, stellar ministries in the past. And the Lord just would not let me take the other job opportunities that opened up, and I felt like the Lord began to say, Chris, it's time for you to start working for yourself and not working for somebody else. So I started selling life insurance, and it was frustrating. I felt purposeless, and I found myself going, I was so angry. God, what am I doing? I have this amazing ministry resume and background and a passion for you, and I'm selling life insurance. And God, that's what pastors do when they have a moral failure. They have nothing else to do but go sell life insurance. And I just looked at God and I said, I haven't had the moral failure. And I got to a point in my life where I was just like, God, have you just used me up? Have I worked for all these nonprofits, all these ministries, all these churches, and you're listening out there, and you know the effort that you put in, the hours you put in when you work for ministry and when you work for something that's just consuming, and you don't get paid that much. And I remember looking at God and saying, you know what, God, maybe I'm just all used up, and I just need to go get a job and take care of my family. I was burned out. And God opened up the door little by little and step by step for me to partner with another good friend who was the pastor at a New Life church. We partnered together. We founded Accelerated Wealth, and God put us in the financial industry. So just, and Matt, feel free to step in if you want to ask me any questions or comment on anything else. But yeah, that's a little bit of my bio.
Yeah, Chris, that's really helpful, I think, for them to see the journey you're on. I do have some questions here, you know, some things people would like to gain today. So let me hit on those, and then maybe you can tailor your presentation. Someone says general information on the topic. This is from Eric Trotman. I'm involved in supporting short-term teams as well as long-term teams. So looking maybe to leverage his own resources for the kingdom. Another is Brenda Matthews, fundraising for missionary support and for church plant needs on the mission field. So again, looking to generate funding for church plants on the field and missionaries.
Great.
And then also a mention, will this be of value to Canadians or just folks in the USA? So those are the three things that are out there, Chris.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I think it'll be of value all the way across. Some of the things, what I'm going to focus on today is I'm going to show you some of the misconceptions that are happening out there and where money is slipping through the cracks. Now, for the Canadian situation, I don't necessarily know your tax code, but what I'm going to let you do is try and do some of these things. I bet you they transfer across here. So let's dive in, and I'm excited about this because, Matt, you said earlier, it said that all the money is out there to fund ministry. The question is, where is it? And I want to help unleash some of it and find some of it. So we don't have time to go in today into all kinds of estate planning issues that I can help with and serve with. I want to show some of the things that most people are just kind of missing And we'll go through these and continuously open up for questions to make this valuable. There's my disclaimer that says I'm not selling anything. By law, I have to do that for you, okay? There, you saw that. Okay, so I'm going to use a fishing analogy here. So some of you like to fish. Let's say that you've got a child or a grandchild that has never caught a fish before, and you're going to take this child to go catch their first fish, and something happens. The superintendent of the golf course or the maintenance guy, he accidentally spills a bunch of fertilizer in one of the ponds that has fish, and it kills all the fish. So here's my question. When would you want to know that all the fish are dead in that pond? Would you want to know it before you go and fish? Would you want to know it after you've been sitting there for an hour or two and your grandson or son or whatever hasn't caught a thing, and you find out, well, no wonder, and everybody's disappointed? Well, obviously the answer is you'd want to know it beforehand. And that's what I call something critical. And I'm going to define this for you. Something critical is something that you really must know before making a decision. It's information that has to be part of your decision-making process, especially when it involves risk. Because if an airline pilot is going through their process or checklist and they miss something critical like, oops, we forgot to de-ice the wings in the wintertime, it could be the last takeoff and a very, very violent landing. Okay, so when we talk about finances, we're going to be looking at critical things that most people are missing, most individuals, but especially high net worth individuals as well. The other definition is sound, and so part of my job is I help people make sound financial decisions for their money. And so as I'm speaking, I'm going to be speaking as if you are somebody that is in front of me, and I'm talking to you that you've got money, and I'm helping you to find money slipping through the cracks. I'm going to need you to try and filter this through to how do I help others acquire this knowledge and information, and I want you to ask questions about that as we go throughout or towards the end. So the first part of a sound decision is you have to ask the question, what do I want my money to do for me? So I want you to think in terms of one of your donors or somebody, a potential donor or an investor. What do they want their money to do for them? The next question is, they need to know all the critical information. What's a fact? What's a myth? What's a misconception about a financial decision or investment before making a decision? And then you put the money into financial instruments or into a plan that ensures there's a high probability that you're going to achieve the goal. That's a sound financial decision. What I find is people miss this process, and where their money is and where they want to be don't usually match. So here's a quick example. I want to show you something called phantom income. Let's say that someone they're sitting in your church, they've got a $500,000 portfolio, it's not in an IRA, and at the end of the year, the stock market has gone down and it's now worth $450,000. It's going the wrong direction. But in January, they get a 1099, which is a distribution. They're going to be taxed on $10,000 that they never took out of the account. And they're confused. And they say, wait a minute, I didn't take $10,000 out of the account. We actually lost money in this account. I don't remember taking any money out. And he looks at his wife and said, honey, did you take money out? Did we buy something that I don't know about? And she's like, no. Well, you take it to the CPA, and the CPA says, hey, I know what that is. That is what's called phantom income. There was an asset, or there was a stock or a mutual fund in that account that at one point went up. It had a gain of $10,000, actually made $10,000, but by the end of the year, the entire account was down and actually lost money, even though there was one gain in one of those stocks or assets that was sold. And as a result of that, you're going to be taxed on money that you do not have. It's called phantom income. So the question is, would that be something critical to know that that could happen to you as an investor before you invested into certain tools that could create phantom income to write a check? So in this case, the tax rate on a long-term capital gain is 15%. This couple or this individual is having to write a $1,500 check to the IRS for money they never made and money they never saw because of the way this portfolio was put in place, the way it performed, and because of the tax situation. Couple important points here. Number one, why did the CPA, the person managing this person's taxes, why did they miss this? Any ideas? The reason they missed it is because the CPA didn't find out about it until the end of the year when they got the statement. It was too late to do anything. My point with that is a lot of times donors and potential donors, they have CPAs managing their taxes, and they think my CPA takes care of my taxes. And in most situations where money's slipping through the cracks is when taxes are taken out. By the time CPAs find out about it, it's too late. They can only look backwards. They're not looking forward and doing forward planning. Wow, how can I adjust my finances to minimize my taxes? Because if we can minimize taxes, I would much rather write that $1,500 check towards ministry, towards missions, towards church planting. I do not want to give it to the IRS. So if we can, this is just one small example. Let's say that that's a $5 million portfolio. That's potentially a $15,000 check that is wasted going to the government when it actually could go to kingdom purposes. So that's just one example. The other question is, why did the attorney miss this? Most high net worth people, they've got a CPA, they've got an attorney, but these things are missed. So here's some other key areas where, when it comes to taxation, why people are missing big things. One is going to be Social Security. That extra $10,000, it's going to bump their Social Security to be paying more in taxes. Let's continue on. So here's what's my point. The point is, most people, including high net worth donors, including high net worth clients, when they're making financial decisions, they're making critical mistakes and they don't even know it because they don't have a process or a checklist, or they just don't know what questions they should even be asking, and as a result, money's leaking away instead of going where it could be going or where they want it to go, and they pay penalties at the end of the year. So just a little bit about, I gave you my ministry background. This is just very quickly, I'm going to breeze over for time, a little bit about my office. I'm one of the owners of Accelerated Wealth here in Colorado Springs. We have offices in several cities and states around the country, A+ Better Business Bureau. I've written articles for Forbes, CNN, Money Magazine, do a radio show every single week, and it plays on a couple different radio stations. There's Bill and my partner. We've been doing radio for about 6 or 7 years. Been on Fox Business. They invited us to come out to Manhattan and interview us on what we do and the processes that we use. I wrote a book called Retirement Confidence in an Uncertain World, and one of the areas where I specialize is helping people move into retirement and actually secure their retirement so they have something called retirement confidence. And retirement confidence is when you know that you have more money coming in retirement than you have going out in expenses. And this is why this is important to you listening. People feel confident in their finances, they give more. When people feel insecure in their finances, they're scarce. They hold back. And I'm a perfect product of that. The reason I got laid off in 2008 is because when the stock market crashed, Focus on the Family's donors stopped, a lot of them stopped giving. Their donations dropped by millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And I was on the chopping block because I had to start letting staff go. And you've all experienced that. When people feel wealthy, they give. When they feel a sense, it's an emotional thing, when they feel a sense of abundance, they're more likely to write the check and say, I want to participate. When they're in fear, they hold back and they hoard, okay? So part of what I do is I help people identify what is the best way I can use my money to take care of my family, to take care of me, take care of my wife, take care of my kids, and then they begin to recognize, oh my goodness, there might be surpluses. Now that we're taken care of, we can actually start giving like we've wanted to give, knowing that we're not going to shortcut ourselves. The other thing is I'm a fiduciary. That just means that I have to act in the client's best interest. This is different than somebody that's a stockbroker who is licensed to sell a financial instrument. When you're a fiduciary, it's much different. You have to build everything around the client, and like a CPA or an attorney, what is in their best interest, versus, hey, here's a product. So it's a much higher level of service and accountability legally wise. So we just go through different reviews for people. We look at their taxes, and we look, and I'm not a CPA, but we look at a proactive planning review, and I'll show you a couple areas where we can find money, like I showed earlier in phantom income, where money is slipping through the cracks. So, and they're paying the IRS instead of planting churches. So one example is there is so many clients out there, so many individuals out there, they have tax-deferred money, money that is growing tax-deferred in an annuity. It's not an IRA. They're not paying taxes on it. Their attorney doesn't know how much money's in there because they built their trust 5-10 years ago. The CPA never sees it because it does not issue a tax, it doesn't create taxes until that person takes the money out or they die and they pass the money on to their kids. Then it becomes a tax time bomb, and the IRS comes in and swoops up a majority of the assets. That can be changed, and that can be changed legally. So if I'm boring you with the financial speak, I'm trying not to, but let me just give you a huge number right now. Last numbers I've seen, there are about 3.5 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars worth of money in non-IRA tax-deferred annuities that people in your congregations or in your constituents, it's sitting there in their asset pool. They don't think about it. They're never, and 70% of them are never going to use that money during their lifetime. And what's happening is it will not be taxed until they pass it on to their children. And when their children inherit it, they will inherit it at whatever tax bracket they are in. If they've got high-income earning kids, if things change and taxes continue to go up, 50% or more, that could go to the government. When if we capture that now, we can actually show people how to minimize the taxation and how to actually start gifting money out of that annuity to offset the taxes. So those are the things that we look at. We look at risk. This is another area where money is slipping through the cracks. Income planning. If people feel like they have more than enough, then they're going to give more. So one of the things I do is I sit down with individual donors, individual people, and I look and see, okay, here's the assets you have. You've got a portfolio, you've got IRAs, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Where you want to go is you want to make sure that you're at peace, you've got retirement confidence, you can travel, you can go on missions, do what you want to do. People don't know how to get across this chasm. And when they don't know how to get across this chasm, they don't know if they can give a piece of this pie because they're afraid they might need it or they might fall short. And when we create the pathway for them to get across, and we use a fraction of this, maybe we use 3/4, maybe we use, I'm sitting with clients right now, in some cases I'm using half of their entire portfolio to accomplish their dreams. Then the conversation goes to, what do you want to do with the other half? What do you want to do with the other 2 million or the other 500,000 to change the world? And they can't have that conversation until they know the first conversation, and many times, is taken care of. So I love this verse, Generosity Unleashed, 2 Corinthians 9:8. God is able to bless you abundantly so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. And this is God's will for us. He wants us to be blessed abundantly so that we have everything that we need so that we can abound in every good work. And sometimes, I'm telling you right now, there are people that are your constituents, there are potential donors, there are people sitting in your church. They just don't know that they can abound in every good work because their financial picture is not structured correctly, and they're using an advisor that's not a fiduciary or not somebody that knows how to find money. And I'm going to say it again, people are more generous when they have abundance and they know their needs are met. They feel like they can start writing checks to bless people. Not because, sure, there's a such thing as sacrificial giving, but it's a lot harder to pull money, the sacrificial money, than it is to pull abundant money. Would you agree? And so that's where we want to get. Now, I want to share with you something that when I started putting this together, there is a tsunami of money coming that we need to be prepared for and direct appropriately, and this is called required minimum distributions. When somebody turns 70, when a baby boomer, anybody turns 70 and a half, they are forced to start taking money out of their retirement accounts. Because they've never been taxed, the IRS requires them to start taking small percentages so that they can be taxed. Many wealthy baby boomers do not need this money. It's been sitting there, it's been growing, they haven't touched it, and because they turned 70 and a half, they have to start taking this money out. They were born in the years 1946 to 64, so the first baby boomer this year turned 70. There are 78 million baby boomers coming. They're all starting to turn 70, and they have to start taking money out, and many of them, it's money they do not need, and if they take it out, they're going to be taxed. And this is how much money there is in IRAs. There's an estimated $16.2 trillion with a T dollars in retirement assets that are subject to future withdrawal on an annual basis, money that has to come out or they get penalized. That means billions and billions of dollars are starting to flow, and it's all taxable. It's all taxable unless they gift it. So let me just give you a little bit of 101 on how this works. Let's say that a client, or I call them clients, you might call them constituents, they might be a member, whatever, they've got $1 million IRA. They don't need it. They're 70 years old. They are going to have to take the first year 3.65%. That means $36,500 is going to come out, and it has to be taxed. Okay? A lot of them, they don't need this money, but they're being forced to take it out. So it's taxed as ordinary income unless it's donated. So they don't need it. They don't want it. One of the solutions, here's a critical mistake. They can take it as income. It's going to count as income. They can turn around and give it, but that income is going to count against their Social Security. It's going to count against their Medicare. It's going to bump up their Medicare costs and expenses. But in many cases, if structured correctly, they can actually tell the custodian. They can call up Charles Schwab. They can call up Allianz. They can call up the financial instrument where the IRA is and say, I want to take that required minimum distribution, but I don't want to take it to me. I want you to send it directly to this ministry, directly to this church planting outfit, directly to this church. Write the check out to the church. And when they do that, the money goes as a gift. It's not considered taxable income. It keeps their Medicare expenses lower. It keeps possibly their Social Security expenses lower, and they're able to give. This is huge. So it's one thing to recognize it, okay? It's another thing, I mentioned these things already, it's another thing now to optimize it. So the challenge with RMDs is many of them are these accounts, they're typically in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. And those are volatile instruments, especially when you have to start taking money out. You increase the volatility, and you get something that I call triple depletion. For the first time, you are forced to take money out. What happens if the stock market goes down while you're taking money out? And what happens if you're in an account that has high fees, like a mutual fund of 3 to 4% in fees? You now have triple depletion, and as a result of that, this is what an account could look like. So this is an actual client of mine. This is what her estimated required minimum distributions are going to be if the stock market does what it has done in the past from 2000 to 2015. So she's 65. She's going to start taking RMDs right here when she turns 70 and a half. The first year she takes money out, it's going to be about $38,000. If the stock market goes up, it could be $45,000. If the stock market crashes like it did in 2000, 2001, and 2002, it could go down to $29,000. Then if the market roars back up, she might have to take out $72,000 that year. And then when the stock market crashes again like it did in 2008, she might only be able to take out $40,000 a couple years later. Then it could go back up to, you get my point. This is what happens if you don't optimize and protect the account. So let me ask you this question. How is this person going to feel giving here? Oh, they might want to give here, Is the giving going to dry up when their RMD drops by 30 or 40%? Absolutely. This is what their account balance looks like. So she has a $900,000 account. If the market drops, now it's only worth $650. Then it goes up, and oh, it's worth $1.1 million. Oh, then it dropped. Oh my goodness, now it's worth. Do you see the fear that this can create? And because of this fear, it can dry up giving, especially if people are thinking, you know, I don't need this money now, but if my spouse dies, my husband dies, I might need this money. If I get sick and go into long-term care, I might need this money. So instead of being volatile all over the place and people freezing up, what we do is we optimize these. So the blue line is what I help people do. The red line is if they just leave it in a mutual fund that flows with the market. So I want you to look at the difference here. If this is an RMD, required minimum distribution for somebody that is 70 years old, in this case, their RMD starts at 40,000, drops, peaks at almost 70, just like I showed you earlier. With our strategy, this is what we're projecting because we've removed a lot of the volatility and added some different growth perspectives. They start here. Notice the RMD's line is much smoother and continues to increase over time. Which person do you think is going to be inclined to give more? The red line or the blue line? The one that has more certainty or the one that has less certainty and more volatility? That's it right there. And they may not give the whole thing, but they might say, you know what, I'm going to start buying life insurance to pass on tax-free with half of it to pass it tax-free to my kids, or I might start buying life insurance with half of the RMD to pass on to my favorite charity while I use the other half to pay for my grandkids' college. So there's all kinds of things, but when we smooth this out, it increases the potential. And look how much more money's coming out. We've got 110,000, 105,000 coming out here compared to 60,000 coming out here just by optimizing those RMDs. This is the potential account balance. Same story, this is what's left over when they pass away. So in the first years, look at the volatile of what the account's worth. In our situation, the account is much smoother, looks a little bit more like a bell curve, and at the end of life, the potential to leave much more, 1.2 million compared to maybe 700, 708,000. Would you like to be built into the beneficiary plan for this, the red line or the black or the blue line? Well, probably either one, but obviously look at the delta here. Look at the change here of close to $300,000 that could be gifted tax-free and still leave your family what may have been left over in the first place. So I'm excited about this because we've never seen this before in the nation. The church has never seen this. The United States has never seen this. We have a coming tsunami here when it comes to this. The other thing we do is we help people optimize their Social Security again so they have more money. Matt, how are we doing on time?
Chris, why don't we say about another 5-8 minutes, and then we'll open it up to the audience for Q&A.
Great. Let me just cover a couple more things. Here's another major misconception. This is the typical asset allocation model. There's a traditional financial planning model that 90% of all advisors are going to use. You go sit down with Edward Jones, Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley. They're going to sit down. They're going to put you into a large cap, mid cap, small cap, international, and a bond portfolio based on your risk tolerance. Now, why do we diversify? This is called diversification. The reason we diversify is we're told that diversification equals safety, right? Well, let's take a look how it performed. That model, 2003 all the way to 2008, it actually performed pretty well. I want you to see the gap between those different large cap, mid cap, small cap funds. We don't know which ones are going to perform well, so you diversify on an up market. Some do better than others. There's a 290% spread in the difference between different funds, okay? How well did these do on the downside? They didn't do real well. When the stock market or a financial crisis happens, diversification stops working and everything goes down together. So the misconception is, does diversification protect you? That's what we're taught over and over and over again. Large cap, mid cap, small cap. Did it work? No, look at the spread. I mean, everything went down 40% to 60%, And look, it's not 15% difference, it's 15% different. They all compressed and went down together. Would this be critical to know that diversification does not protect you in a down market? Yeah. Did this happen to any of you back in 2008 or 2000, 2001? I bet it did. Did it happen to people sitting in your church or sitting donors that you work with? I almost guarantee, I bet you that it really, really did. So that it just doesn't work. It's critical to know. And the issue is people are believing that this old, outdated model is still functioning, and it doesn't work today. And there's a lot of reasons why I don't have time to go with. But the history is the proof, and so we have to get people out of this model. And they don't have a process or a checklist. And this is, when people lose lots of money, this is the stock market, 47% loss here in 2000, 2001, 2008, 57%. This is where I lost my job because people stopped giving, okay? And these are things that we can change in individual situations. Last point, Matt, I'm going to go to. There's so many things to cover, but what I want to cover real quick here are mutual funds, because these are what I call the kryptonite of people's retirement plans. And I'll tell you why here. The fees inside mutual funds most people are not aware of. I ask people, what are the fees in your mutual fund? And typically they'll say, well, I think it's 1% or something to that effect. Well, that's a disclosed expense ratio. That's the average fee. However, Forbes magazine wrote an article, there are a lot of undisclosed fees that you cannot find. They had to do a research project to find hidden missing fees. So let me give you an example here. Additional fees that you won't find written anywhere but that are there are trading costs. The costs to trade a mutual fund company to buy and sell the stocks that it has. Okay, that's about 1.4% additional per year. Then 90% of a mutual fund's assets are invested. The other 10% is in cash. Probably didn't know that. That's what the prospectus says. That means that when you're growing, you got 10% sitting in cash, and over time that drags the portfolio and it costs you another 0.83%. And then if you're being managed by a manager, if it's in an IRA or it's in a 401k or you've got phantom income taxes, typically on average that's another 1% in fees or costs. So the total average fees are about 4.23% on somebody that has a mutual fund portfolio. If you've got $1 million portfolio, and you can put a 0 behind this, you can cut this in half, whatever, 1 million times 4%, that's $40,000 a year in annual fees that are bleeding out of somebody's account that they usually do not even know, and they're not getting any downside protection or income generating abilities really in this case. And so where I look at money slipping through the cracks, those fees can be dramatically reduced, and the money that they would have been losing or paying or slipping away in fees can be redirected to the things that they love, and they'll probably get, when they work with us, lower fees, lower risk, lower volatility, and historically higher returns and better performance. So these are the things that God has led us into how to do this for people, and I do this on a daily basis with people, helping them find the money slipping through the cracks so that they can find security and retirement confidence, and then when working with believers, it turns into sometimes the conversation of, okay, now you've got money that you can do the things that you're passionate about, take care of your grandkids, fund college, tithe, well, they should be tithing anyway, giving, gifting, those types of things. So Matt, there's so much more we can go through here, but that's the key. What if we could cut those fees by half and give them better returns? Could you challenge a donor and say, if I can get you out of the 4% in fees and cut those by half, would you be willing to give 1% away or 2% or whatever? The conversation's endless. Here's the point. Even your high net worth donor, because I work with high net worth people, they think their CPA is taking care of the tax issues, and the CPA is not aware of the tax issues that they have many times because it doesn't show up. They think the attorney is taking care of their estate issues, but the attorney doesn't know that tax-deferred assets are creating tax-ticking time bombs. They're using financial instruments that don't match what they need. They're not sound. What they need their money to do is something different than what their tools or instruments are designed to do. As a result, money's slipping through the cracks, and I'm telling you, there are billions and billions of dollars that are coming that can be used if people are aware where money is slipping through the cracks, and it can be directed into powerful kingdom opportunities.
Thank you, Chris. I want to use this opportunity to allow our live audience to interact with Chris, ask him any questions you may have about the presentation, or maybe even things that didn't surface that you feel like he might be able to address. Chris, this comes from Josh Parker. He says, in regards to reducing fund fees, do you encourage index funds where the fees can be as low as 0.25%?
Yes, but what I like to use are exchange-traded index funds, so ETFs, because you're exactly right. Those fees can be as low as 0 if you're in a Schwab account to 0.15 to 0.1. Now, the problem is if you're in a typical buy and hold strategy, you can still lose 47 or 57%. And so we like to use lower cost index funds, but we have an adaptive management strategy for just one of our strategies where, let me give you an example. In 2008, when the average losses were 40 to 50%, our accounts were actually up 11% because when we saw the market tanking, we went into a short position, which means we bet against the market and actually made money as the market was going down because we were able to adapt to market conditions instead of buy and hold. Buy and hold is a dead philosophy. It's failed miserably.
Thank you, Chris.
Great question.
This is from Eric Trotman. He said this was very helpful to open up some ideas on where people could find opportunities to give. Is there somewhere online I can read more about this? Do you have something that gives a brief overview as well?
I have my book. My book doesn't specifically cover these items. It's called Retirement Confidence in an Uncertain World. It's on Kindle, downloadable. It will talk more about helping people find retirement confidence, which it's an easy book to read. It's a story format. I wrote it in the 1-minute manager format. A lot of ladies like reading it because they actually, if they haven't participated, not all ladies are like this, but a lot of my clients, the husband's done all the financial work for 2 or 3 decades, and it's the first financial book that she reads and really understands how to be on the same page with her husband making financial decisions. What that would lead to is it helps people come to financial confidence so they can give more. As far as all these items and these different things like that, I don't have anything specific that you read. It's just stuff that we do every day, though. So the key would be what we offer to people is we do a free initial analysis. It doesn't cost anybody to sit down with us or get on the phone and actually go through an initial analysis. And typically within a half an hour, I can find money slipping through the cracks that they're not aware of. And then they can make the decision, do I want to explore further and have me build a plan and actually quantify how much is slipping through the cracks. So that's an easy way to say, hey, there's somebody you should talk to. It'll take you half an hour. I look at their statements, their tax returns, and identify, do I see any glaring red flags where we can redirect money back to them or where they want it to go?
Chris, on that note, Jonathan Bach asks, how do you present this information to others? I think it's related to that last question. So let's say you work for an agency and you're responsible for donor development, or you're a part of a local church and you have a big initiative to do church planning in North Africa. These things all cost a lot of money. How do you present this information to others if you live in that mission agency church world?
That's what I was trying to figure out. How do we make, because I can do this, but it's really challenging for you to sit and do that. I do have some checklists that I hand to CPAs and I hand to attorneys that maybe we could craft these for you. And basically what you do is you could hand the checklist to a donor and say, would you just take this little quiz for me real quick? I've got 10 question quizzes and I've got 25 question quizzes, and it's a true-false questionnaire. And for every true that they signify, yeah, I've got a true, that is it basically is a red flag that tells me there's a high probability there's money slipping through the crack in this area, in this area, in this area. Now, it's a proprietary checklist, so I don't just hand that out to everybody. It's, I hand it to CPAs that have agreed to work with me and attorneys that agreed to work with me. We could certainly talk about crafting something like that for you, especially those of you who are in the donor development world, if we had an agreement that it doesn't end up going to another financial advisor that doesn't know really how to do what I do. But that, I think, could be the easiest way for you to sit down with a donor and say, you know, I just went to a financial presentation of a gentleman who works with high net worth clients, and he finds money slipping through the cracks. And he gave me this checklist. Would you take 5 minutes or 2 minutes and go through it real quick and just see maybe there's money that you have slipping through the crack? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, it's a great idea, Chris. And on that note, Chris, why don't you, we'll get there at the end, but just in the event people don't stay for the hour, why don't you give them your email so they can follow up with you on some of those things that we just talked about? Would you just give your email right now?
I will. It's Chris A. at Accelerated Wealth, and I'll see if I can just type it up here on the screen.
I think, Chris, if you go to the last slide, I think there is a slide.
Did I put it there?
Yeah, no, we did. Go to the very end.
There it is. There it is.
Okay.
There it is, right there. Okay.
Yeah, so someone else said, thank you, great presentation. What's the name of your company? So there you go. Chris, here's an interesting question. This person is asking, how as churches and missions organizations do we attract high net worth donors and advise them of these issues? Is there some type of a conference they could go to or a meeting and have a licensed professional talk to them? You've kind of hit on that a little bit already, but maybe just expand on that. How do we attract high net worth donors if we live in the mission agency and church world? And how do we, share these things?
I do workshops all the time for high net worth people that are trying to solve their financial problems. So, one of the ways is, thinking through. It could be creating an economic summit and bringing in a guest speaker that is going to speak to high net worth donors and that has a mastery of these types of issues to be able to talk them through and help them. Here's the deal. You have to be able to connect with the high net worth donor. You have to be able to get them to recognize that they have some issues and that they need to do something about it. And so, locally, I mean, this is something I, do for Matt. I speak locally at different places. That might be an option. It could be that maybe I fit in my calendar and it's worth me to come out and speak somewhere. I obviously can't do that a lot because I'm running a business here, but that could be open for conversation. But I also have other people around the country that possibly could speak. So maybe, Matt, we could explore something like that, that if a ministry wants to create an economic summit and do something to bless their donors and bring some other friends that might be high net worth donors or potential donors, when you give something that means something to them or that's valuable to them, then they'll come and then they'll go, wow, gosh, I didn't know that. And then that opens the conversation, opens the door for just a few of the things that we talked about today.
One of the thoughts as you described that, Chris, a lot of donor development people inside missions organizations, they have estate planning. It's very common. Wycliffe, Seed Company, I mean, you name it. A big part of what their donor development people do is they interact with high net worth donors, and even those who maybe aren't considered high net worth, but they get them thinking about estate planning. And so when they move on to heaven, that they would release some of those resources to Bible translation or whatever. That might be a great opportunity to surface some of these ideas. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, and I guess my concern about that is that we're talking about we need the money now to reach people, not in 10 years or in 20 years. So I love estate planning, but what I found, a lot of my clients, they love what we call legacy living giving. Not just legacy when I'm gone, but living giving. What can I do now and to actually enjoy the impact I'm going to make on the world? that's where the IRA and the RMD issue is really going to force the issue. So they may build an estate plan. Hey, I've got several $1 million, or I have maybe it could be just $500,000 in a 401k or an IRA I don't need. But oh my goodness, I am forced to take money out of it now. And most foundations that I have seen, the way that their money is managed is using traditional approaches that have a lot of fees. So it forces the conversation to say, well, what do we do with the RMDs now, and how do we smooth those out, and how do we increase those? And if you could give now, what would you do? So, and again, it comes back to what I said. When people have retirement confidence, they know they have more money coming in for as long as they're retired compared to the amount of expenses they have going out. They don't have to worry about their provision. It's just like, we got money. Why don't we find something we're passionate about? Let's go participate. But it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He just tapped into the way that God created humanity, which was people think about themselves first, and then they think about their needs, and they think about their bodily needs, and then they think about, and when those things start to get covered, like God promised His people He would cover them, then all of a sudden there's a sense of abundance that says, man, I will be able always to be, never require aid, and to be generous on every single occasion. We have to get people to the point where they realize they don't need aid anymore, and they can be generous on every occasion.
Chris, here's another question. Do you find that many high net worth older donors are afraid to talk about their finances? And how would you find ways to build trust with your high net worth donors so they would consider discussing some of these options?
They're not afraid to talk about it with me, but remember that the reason they come to see me is we talk about money right away. Whether they hear me on the radio show or have met me in person, or repeat the question, Matt.
So do you find high net worth donors are afraid to talk about their finances? Maybe try and interpret this, Chris, from the context of someone in the donor development world.
Okay.
How would you build trust? So you're in the donor development world, whether you're church or agency, and you've got a great vision, and fundraising, as a friend of mine says, is a beautiful spiritual ministry. So you're offering a service to your constituents that they already support your organization, but how do you build trust with them to talk about these possibilities and releasing this money for kingdom work?
That is such a great question. The first way is competence. So, when a high net worth person talks to a high net worth person, there's something different there, okay? There's an experience, there's authority, there's something about people that have worked hard to make money, they understand, and there's I don't know, I don't want to say it's a club, but there's a affinity. However, not all donor development people have always been in that position, and sometimes you find yourself in a world where you can build relationships, but you've not come from a high net worth place, and you're just not able to bridge the gap there to those deeper conversations. So here's one way to do this. Learning some of the lingo enough and bringing a checklist in place. And I really think this could be done without you being, having to go, learn everything I know. That's just not possible. You don't have the time. But it's hey, I recently attended a whatever you call a lecture, a workshop for high net worth individuals and where money is slipping through the cracks. They gave us a checklist that really identifies where money might be slipping through the cracks. And we could work on this, conversation or the script or approach it, but would that be something that would interest you if there was money slipping through the cracks, or you're paying too much in taxes or too much in losses or fees? Would you be interested in finding more out about that? Would you be interested in taking a quick quiz? Sure. And if they go, oh, interesting, yeah, I got several yeses here, then it brings in the conversation, would you be interested in talking to somebody for half an hour that might be able to help you identify some of these areas? Yeah, I think I'd be willing to do that. And then what happens is it's the handoff of, why don't you let me connect you with the gentleman who I met that specializes in this area, And you don't have to be the expert, you just have to be competent in that conversation and the tool to help them identify things that maybe they weren't aware of.
So if you're listening still, and that's interesting to you, you work with donors and you are wanting to have that conversation about helping them find that money slipping through the cracks for the sake of kingdom investment, again, I would encourage you to follow up with Chris. Who knows what might come out of this, but it might be really helpful to be able to hand something simple like that to constituents. So, Chris, we're about ready to wrap this up here. I want to really quickly go over some upcoming events at 1615 to let you know what's coming our way. We have another free webinar happening on September 14th at 12 noon Mountain. It's called Missionary Debriefing. This is about debriefing full-time missionaries who have served on the field and helping them make that transition from the field context back to life in the United States. What an important resource this is, and Jeff Jackson is leading this one, and he himself was a pioneer missionary church planner, so he's got quite a bit of experience in this. So agency or church world, and you're thinking about how to help those people make that transition, I highly recommend this webinar. Another webinar here is by Phil Oxshire. He is the senior pastor at Crestview Bible Church in Hutchinson, Kansas, and his session is called Set Apart. How do you connect the local church to the Lord's work? So if you're a churchman or even agency person and you're thinking about how do you help local churches pursue God's work in reaching the nations, I think there's going to be a lot of great information shared on this webinar. And his church has a strong global vision, so he's speaking from experience. And last, I want to mention again the mission table, a brand new resource 1615 launched last year. It's a place where we move conversation about missions. We bring together leading missions thinkers and practitioners, and we tackle some of the most critical, controversial topics that are impacting the missions world today. Those are archived, last year's episodes, this year's episodes that have already aired, and then a new episode comes out just about a monthly basis. If you visit missiontable.org, you can learn more about this great resource. And one of the things that drives it, really similar to Chris's topic today, we talk about knowing comes before doing and shapes doing. And one of the reasons that so many churches don't do missions well is they've not thought about missions well. And so this is a great resource to encourage missions folks, mission agency people, and church leaders to think well about missions. Chris, I'm going to leave this slide up here, so if anyone still needs to jot down the information, they can. Hey, brother, I want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. Some great questions, I think, came out of this, and who knows what God will do. So, brother, thank you so much
and, you know,
for sharing.
Matt, I just wanted to say, you know, if there's somebody that really is in that donor development area and you want to have a conversation or something, let me know. You know, we might be able to just, I think, create something and some ideas. I'm just so excited about how much money there is out there. It just needs to be redirected, and you know, please contact me.
Absolutely, and that's a great way for us to end. We talked about at the beginning how all of the resources necessary to finish the Great Commission, God has already given to the church. And there's lots of reasons why churches aren't releasing those resources, and one of them might be that they don't know, in many cases, there's resources to be released. So thanks again, Chris, and I want to thank our live audience for being with us today. I'm Matthew Ellison for 1615. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.